Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, and it's remaining fairly dry, but shower activity will increase, especially in the north and west towards the weekend, start of next week, as a westerly flow will take over. We've got a lot of high pressure over the top of us at the moment, and it's going to remain fairly cold for the next few days, but it will slowly turn milder and more unsettled from next week, and it looks like a pest from the west pattern will dominate into the start of February, as we will see on the GFS, GEM, ECWF and the Ensembles. Something else I do want to highlight is the GFS, typically as it does, likes to put a little bit of a spanner in the works, and the last few runs have hinted at potentially a Scandinavian high at the day 10 to day 14 time frame, and actually has pulled in some bitterly cold air from the east on the 6 o'clock run and midday run yesterday, and even the midnight run produced an easterly wind. The latest 6 o'clock run that we're going to have a look at didn't as much. Tried to pull the high pressure up, but didn't as much. So yeah, very interesting seeing the GFS suddenly starting to show that and being consistent in showing that in the last sort of 3 or 4 runs. So we'll have a look at that, and that is something that could happen towards the middle of the month, but we're not expecting anything remotely cold for at least the next 7 to 10 days. That is definitely extended range stuff, but we will check out in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So if we do start on the live radar, you can see there are a few showers around on the east coast at the moment, and as we've got high pressure out to our west and a bit of a northerly flow, it's building a chilly air mass, so it does feel relatively cold out there, but the temperatures on the thermometer are around average for the time of year, and it will be cold overnight with widespread low single digit temperatures, if not towards freezing. Now, around that high pressure, typically when we get a northerly or northeasterly, we get a few areas of convection and a few showers. And that's what we're getting in eastern England in the moment, into the south, a few showers pushing in, and these would fall as snow if the upper air temperatures were a few degrees colder, but most of it is falling as cold rain, and it does continue up the northeast coast into eastern Scotland as well. Again, nothing too significant, but just a few showers and some thicker cloud in places. Further westwards, it is very dry, and it is relatively chilly. You look at those temperatures, we sort of mix between yellows and blues there, again indicating those temperatures are around average for the time of year, sort of 5 to 8 degrees, again cold over higher ground, and then will be colder overnight. You can still see there is a block of very cold air still over Europe, and this slightly milder air that is coming round it into parts of northwest Europe is now pushing in. Again, the air mass over the top of us is not particularly mild. It's actually quite a cold air mass, but at the surface it's milder than that colder air we've had stuck under us under the higher pressure over the past week or so. Now, if you do put on the UKV and go and have a look what the temperature and the precipitation is doing over the next 5 days, you can see those showers down the east coast over the course of this evening, but it will be a relatively dry and clear night for many. A bit of cloud here or there, but nothing too thick or too bad, meaning those temperatures will fall away probably towards the low single digits, if not towards freezing or below that. Into tomorrow afternoon, again a relatively dry day, a bit of a weather front starting to appear in the far north and the west, and that is precipitation pushing in as that westerly flow is starting to take over. It will take a number of days for proper westerly, mild and unsettled air to get in, but for a time being, weather front's trying to approach from the northwest. Now, for most areas in the south and east, it's a dry day, but that weather front will spread in, giving thicker cloud and some patchy rain in places through early hours of Saturday. And then for most, apart from the far south and east through Saturday, it will be quite a cloudy day with areas of precipitation, light or drizzly patches drifting in from the north and the west. And then as we head into Sunday as well, more rain pushing to the north and west, and very cloudy further south and eastwards as we start to bring in these warmer, more miserable sort of air masses in, but not fully dominating yet because high pressure is still lingering. And then as we head into Monday, more precipitation spreads through, and you can see more of a westerly flow and some bigger weather fronts starting to approach from the north and the west, and more heavier showers. They're just hints as we go into the start of February, but it still is relatively dry for most, apart from Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland and Western Scotland. Most areas are still relatively dry with some areas of cloud, but also some areas of clear skies. And under these clear skies, it will be chilly, especially overnight. Now, if you put on the temperatures, if we start on the upper air temperatures, you can see there are sort of oscillating air masses coming in over the course of the next few days. You see repeated bouts of blues and then greens there, again indicating sort of a zonal flow, and sort of up and down upper air temperatures, and again that will get more extreme and will provide bigger areas of cloud and rain into next week, especially for the north and west as lower pressure starts to take over. But it's because high pressure is just lingering towards our south, keeping that pressure high and stopping those weather fronts and sort of squeezing the energy out of them. So that's why these weather fronts are pushing through and sort of disintegrating as they spread southwards and eastwards. But a majority of the models into early February do have that low pressure being more dominant, especially in the north, but it still is uncertain in the south. Put on the max temperatures, you can see this afternoon widely around average for the time of year, 5 to 8 degrees, and then overnight you can see those temperatures plummeting away towards the mid to low single digits, relatively cool but not ridiculously cold. A few areas maybe -2 to -4. As we head into Friday afternoon, again temperatures rising to around that 5 to 7 degree mark, again average for the time of year, but feeling relatively chilly in places. And then Friday night into Saturday, a frost for southern and eastern areas where we've got clearer skies, and into Saturday afternoon, those temperatures once again 5 to 8 degrees. And then into Sunday, overnight temperatures once again frosty in a few places, but many areas hovering above freezing. And Sunday afternoon again widely 5 to 8 degrees, slightly milder further northwards and westwards, maybe 9 or 10. Then into Monday, many areas overnight are relatively mild, sort of 5, 6, 7 degrees, but maybe a frost over Scotland. And then you can see by Monday afternoon, once again, 5 to 8 degrees. You can see it is generally average for the time of year. Some areas slightly colder, some areas slightly milder, and overnight frosts will continue. So yeah, looking pretty chilly. Nothing especially cold, nothing especially mild, and relatively dry for the next 5 days, bar from a few areas of rain and a few showers in the north and the west, spreading southwards and eastwards at times. But it definitely does look like it's going to turn much more unsettled towards the middle of next week. So if you do go for the GFS and see what that is showing over the course of the next sort of couple of weeks, you can see that northeasterly wind at the moment, but nothing bitterly cold, just around the high pressure. The high pressure still stays in control, but more low pressure tries to run in into next week, and that's why we start seeing more greens and blues take over, especially through Scotland, bigger weather fronts through the early part of February. But this is where the GFS goes interestingly, sort of diverges away from what a lot of other models are showing, and it starts to try and build a Scandinavian high. It has a go on this run, but it never fully comes off and actually keeps us relatively unsettled in the north and west, drier in the south and the east. And if we put on those upper air temperatures, you can see colder areas trying to move into Eastern Europe, but we need to get this high pressure further northwards for that to come off. However, if we do run it back to maybe next a week's time, put on the pressure and put on the midnight run, what happens to the high pressure? It migrates further northwards and it actually starts to get towards Scandinavia, and right towards the end of the run, we pull in an easterly wind. Actually, quite a cold easterly wind, pretty bitterly cold, perhaps beyond that. If you go to the 6 o'clock run to the following evening, another easterly wind, and the midday run yesterday, which was very cold, goes a proper cold easterly at around day 10 and continues in this blocked cold spell. And if it did continue after that, you wouldn't be surprised to see quite a severe beast from the east pattern into middle of February with that. Again, these are individual GFS operation runs in the longer term. It's just signs of this high pressure trying to ridge further northwards and eastwards, and it would cut off that westerly theme that we think is pretty concrete now for the start of February, at least in the north. And this, could keep many areas drier and then eventually turn us a lot colder. So we will have to see how this does develop. If you go to the GEM, see how that does compare. Again, westerly flow continuing into next week and becoming slightly more widespread at times, but the south does look likely to stay generally on the drier side. The most unsettled weather is going to remain in the north. Here, yes, high pressure ridging towards Scandinavia, but with that big purples towards Iceland and Greenland, you wouldn't expect to see any proper cold weather with this, as it's going very stormy here, and that low pressure would likely run into most of the UK and turn us all stormy. And that's the pattern a lot of the runs are going for. Just the GFS, bit of a span in the works the last day or so. building that high pressure further northwards and eastwards and pulling in a cold easterly wind. GM not having any of that, going very stormy and very dominant with the tropospheric polar vortex moving into the North Atlantic. If you look at the ECMWF, again, high pressure in control at the moment, but more of a westerly flow, and those low pressures dominating a bit further south with that black line where the jet stream roughly is further southwards than both the GFS and the GEM runs. At day 10, though, yes, it doesn't go very westerly and stormy. That low pressure systems that would produce that are staying more towards northeast Canada, and it does reach high pressure to our north. Again, it's nowhere near in a position to pull in cold weather, actually pulling a warm southerly in. But if it did migrate northwards, we would start to pull this very cold air out towards eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and Russia. We'd start to pull that in, and it would go something similar to what those GFS runs were showing. So again, could the ECMWF be sort of going on to that theme as well? It is, as I said, it is the day 10 date to day 14 time frame. It is very much extended range and can change a lot, but the GFS has definitely caught onto it the last day or so, and perhaps the ECMWF is even showing that ridging to the north in around 10 days time. We will have to see how it does happen. It could disappear from the models in the next day or two, but I do want to address it because it could be a slight pattern change in the longer term. We did think there could be impacts from the stratospheric warming, and this could be it. We can't say for certain until we see this more concrete. And of course, MJO phases that we have addressed earlier this month as well. That is trending into a phase that could support Scandinavian higher pressure. So we'll have to see what happens with that. If you do finish by looking at the ensembles, if you do start on the GFS, you can see no real signs of any cold weather here. Generally average to maybe below average over the next week, and then slightly above average, a period of above average weather. And I think that's that high pressure trying to ridge up, to bring slightly warmer air masses, but again, nothing too ridiculous. Higher precipitation, but actually the precipitation signal has decreased a little bit in the longer term. Still there, so it's still indicating more unsettled weather, but definitely in the south holding off more. If you compare it to Glasgow, though, further northwards, much higher precipitation signal. Again, indicative that the majority of the precipitation and the weather fronts and the stronger winds will be in the north. It's going to be a typical cooler and wetter in the north, slightly milder and drier in the south. But of course, we could see an inversion in the south as well if we do pull in cooler air masses at times. So again, we'll have to see how it goes day to day. If you finish by just looking at the ECMWF ensembles for London, again, looking at the midnight run, again, generally average to below average, maybe slightly above average at times over the course of the next couple of weeks. No signs of any major mild weather, no signs of anything majorly cold. But of course, some of those runs in the longer term that are starting to pull in colder air masses could be on terms with the GFS, but we will have to see what happens with that. And again, precipitation not quite as high as you'd expect for a very stormy spell, but as I said, most of that precipitation will be in the northern half and will drift southwards at times, and probably losing any intensity to those low pressure systems and weather fronts as it does sink southwards as well. And of course, it all depends on the positioning of the jet stream. The ECMWF had that jet stream definitely further southwards than the GFS and the GM, and that subtle 50 to 100 mile difference in a week's time can make a huge difference in whether you see a few millimetres of rain or 10 to 15 millimetres of rain. So we'll have to see, as I said, how that does develop. So yeah, looking dry in the next 5 days, relatively cool, nothing particularly going on, just overnight frost and a few precipitation patches further northwards and westwards with a few showers. As we enter next week, turning much more unsettled in the north, still relatively dry in the south, but could be unsettled at times, and sort of oscillating air masses, so cooler weather and mild weather mixed together. And then in the longer term, most ensemble members and most operational runs keeping us on that westerly theme, trying to build up high pressure over top of us, maybe to our east and our north, and the GFS over the last 24 hours has produced some very cold runs as well. That could happen, but we'll have to see. It is, as I said, in the extended range, and we'll still just have to see if it does stay in the output over the next few days, and then we'll be able to ramp up any watching of what could happen with that. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.